two, three, four.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to the Hauntological Society podcast, the podcast where we do it multiple times just to get it right. Now, this is the podcast where we talk about all things weird, UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts. Um, but so far, we've been talking about the Satanic Panic and mass hysteria. But before we get into all that, here with me, as always, my bedmate, the mother of my child, Wendy.
Ah, it's windy.
What's up?
Overlook my voice. My allergies are flared up. I got the smelly cat musician voice going on, so hopefully it'll be better in a couple weeks.
Smelly cat?
Phoebe, used to from Friends.
Oh, I gotcha.
Smelly cat.
Okay.
You're a musician, man.
I know. Last week we had the blood moon. You and I went out like little teenage witches, checking out the moon at 3 o'clock in the morning, taking photographs.
Keep the neighbors up.
Yeah, everybody looking out their windows, wondering what the hell we're doing.
With our broom and torches, doing little dances around campfire.
Do my little dance around the campfire. Anyway, um, so we got a rough one for you today. I'm not gonna do a whole lot of banner to start, but if you haven't listened to the first two episodes, you should go back and check it out. Um, and the first episode you'll notice is actually in two parts. So listen to the where the audio screws up, and then once the audio messes up, go to the bonus episode, and you'll hear the full episode, and you won't miss anything, and you'll be caught up to date. So please check that out for us if you haven't already. That way you understand what we're talking about today. And so today we're going to talk about the result of the Satanic Panic, how it's ruined people's lives, and how the spread of misinformation um, really destroyed a lot of things. Um, people's lives, people's jobs, children's lives. But before I get into this again, because this is our second time recording, which it seems to be on par for what we do here.
We do better the second time around.
We do. I think it's because we get all the bullshit out, and then we can just we're like, fuck it, we'll just do it. We got to start doing that the first time. But before we get into this, I just want to give a little trigger warning that this case is rough. This is this is bad because there's lots of talk of sexual abuse, child abuse, animal abuse, animal sacrifice, um, infant murder. So it's really bad. Just want to give you a heads up, just in case that you're sensitive to those things. But anyway, oh, so I was going to talk about multiple cases, and I'll mention multiple cases, but once I started getting into researching, I realized that this first case is just so massive. There's so much involved that I think this one case warrants its own episode. Um, and it's not gonna. There's not gonna be a lot of times that we do true. We're gonna have true crime on this podcast if we go for it, but this is like the most true crime I think we'll probably ever get. Because I just like the more ghosty stuff. Um, but I think the mass hysteria part of this is um, I don't know. I find it interesting. So the first case we're going to talk about. Well, let me just say this. Let's do this. Here we go. Many court cases influenced by the Satanic Panic, which is a moral panic from the 1980s and 90s, involving false accusations of ritual abuse, were later overturned. But the exact percentage is difficult to determine, and there are a lot of cases that were involved in the Satanic Panic that probably weren't titled as Satanic Panic, but there's tons of court documents out there that mention satanic ritual, satanic cult, um, and things like that. So they're out there. You just got to look for them. But there's a lot of them, and a lot of them end up being like it says, end up being overturned because there's just no evidence. People are just wrongly being accused of things just because they're different, or somebody wants to I don't know, have some.
X in trouble or
Yeah. Oh yeah. We'll talk about that. That does happen. Um, However, here are some of the key details to these trials. Um, Hundreds of people were falsely accused, often based on unreliable testimony, coerced confessions, and flawed forensic evidence. That happens far too much. And if that sounds familiar, it happened back in the 1692, the Satanic Witch Trial. Or shit, the Salem Witch Trials. Satanic Witch Trial. I got Satan on the brain. Satan.
oh, get
Um,
my smudge stick.
Smudge you. A significant number of convictions were later overturned, especially in high-profile cases like the McMartin preschool trial, which we're following today, the West Memphis Three, and the Kern County child abuse cases. Some estimates suggest that dozens of major cases were overturned, though others remained in place due to legal barriers. So that sucks. Even though people were convicted and they knew that the evidence was wrong, but they could not change it, the outcome in the court, the eye of the court, because of legal terms. Think about that. Like, you know that you're innocent. The court knows you're innocent. But they can't change your case because of the way the law is worded. That's bullshit.
Happens all the time.
It does happen, unfortunately. So, like I said, we're talking about the McMartin preschool trial, and this is a doozy. The following excerpt was written on famoustrials.com, which is famous-trials.com, and I'll link that in the show notes. It says, I feel that the opening paragraph had so much to say, and it was written so perfectly that it summed up everything I wanted to present to you in such a way that I choose to read it verbatim. So the website says, the McMartin preschool abuse trial, the longest and most expensive criminal trial in American history, should serve as a cautionary tale. When it was all over, the government had spent 7 years and $15 million investigating and prosecuting a case that led to no conviction. More seriously, the McMartin case left in its wake hundreds of emotionally damaged children, as well as ruined careers for members of the McMartin staff. No one paid a bigger price than Ray Buckley, one of the principal defendants in the case, who spent 5 years in jail awaiting trial for a crime most people recognize today he never committed. McMartin juror Brenda the McMartin juror Brenda Williams said that the trial experience taught her to be more cautious. I now realize how easily something can be said and misinterpreted and blown out of proportion. Remember that, by the way. I think that's a key. I think that's a key thing here, a key ingredient we need to remember. Another juror, Mark Bassett, singled out experts for blame. I thought some of the expert testimony about the children told you more about the expert than the child. I mean, if the expert says the children are always 100% believable, then you have a child who is not believable. Oh, I read that wrong. What he's saying is, if an expert says children are 100% believable, and then you have a child who's not believable, either the expert is extremely biased or they've never seen anything like that child before. So basically, this juror came out and said that these people were pushing the narrative, that they were getting whatever answer they wanted out of the children, no matter what. That happens in multiple cases, happens multiple times, not even with just children, like people in general. Like they want it, they're going to get it. So the trial started because Judy Johnson, a mother of a 2.5-year-old, called a detective, Jane Hogg, claiming that Ray Buckley was molesting her child. Obviously, it sparked an immediate investigation, and after a search of Buckley's home, they confiscated things like a few toys of a rubber duck, a teddy bear, and a stack of Playboys. Now, to me, I mean, that doesn't seem nefarious to me. Just what they confiscated.
Do you know how many men would be guilty just by those items alone?
I mean, how many men how many men today are toy collectors? You know, I have toys. You know, um,
Playboys.
Playboys. You know, it's ridiculous. Uh, if you read Playboy, it does not mean you're a child abuser. It doesn't mean you're a Satanist. You know, it's possible that Playboy has great articles, great interviews.
Yeah, wink, wink.
um, yeah, I just think that's, I don't know. This whole thing blows my mind. So if I'm always like, that blows my mind. It's crazy because it is. I don't get it. So the police began interrogations with the child, who couldn't even identify Buckley from a photo lineup. And this child was 2.5 years old, and they're like asking this kid to identify his or her teacher through a photo lineup. And I mean, do you think that if our kid at 2.5 years old could have pointed out someone he knew from a photo? Hello.
Maybe.
Oh,
I was thinking, I
I
mean,
thought I lost you there. I was like,
you know, ours is a little exceptional. So, but you have to think of the narrative of a daycare and how many. I mean, if it's a thriving daycare, how many people they have? Because I think you can only have 15 kids per adult.
yeah,
So how many adults do they see in a day? And in a 2-year-old, they're probably not going to remember, you know, everyone.
yeah,
So
that's crazy. Might want to play a drinking game. Every time I say that's crazy, I want to have a drink. Probably help you get through this case a little better because it's nuts. It's crazy. Drink. All right. It wasn't long before the school contacted the parents in the form of a letter and asked for specific allegations from their kids, and then asked them to keep quiet about the allegations to protect the child. But unable to keep a lid on these allegations, the word spread like wildfire. Now, that's crazy in itself because they were putting out, they didn't say, hey, we need you to ask your kid what's going on with them. We need you to ask them specifically, is this going on to them? To me, that feels like leading the narrative. Like, instead of saying, hey, has something happened to you? You say, hey, has this person done this to you, with a specific direction? And they might go, yeah, 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 they did it, and they did what they do, and they're going to repeat to you what you just asked them. You know, so
if they could even say back what you asked them, I mean,
that's the other thing. How old are these kids? I mean, if they got kids that are 2.5 years old inside the daycare, I mean, how many of the kids are under, less community,
yeah.
under the ages to communicate? Um, that's crazy. uh, Now, according to FamousChilds.com, Judy Johnson's reports of misbehavior at the McMartin preschool became increasingly bizarre, and it does. Listen to this. She claimed that Peggy Buckley, Ray's mother, was involved in satanic practices. She was said to have taken Johnson's son to a church where the boy was made to watch a baby being beheaded. They was forced to drink the blood. She insisted that Ray Buckley had um, sodomized her son with his head in a toilet and had taken him to a car wash and locked him in the trunk. Johnson told police that Ray pranced around the preschool in a cape and a Santa Claus costume, and that other teachers at the school chopped up rabbits and placed some sort of star on her son's bottom. Now, what? Like how how did she even come up with this idea? I mean, what kind of teaching was she taught? Like, where did she come from? Like, what? To me, this sounds like she came up with some like extreme. Uh, she has some sort of extreme background that just ingrained these crazy ideas in her head, or she's delusional and schizophrenic. I mean, this
Yeah.
screams mental illness to me, one way or another. I mean, I don't even understand. Like, okay, if I have a problem at my kid's school, I'm not going to go tell the preacher that it's because their mom and accuse their mom of like being something that they're not. It just how did it escalate to this? Like, and people took this seriously. They're like, okay, his mom's a Satanist who takes part in ritualistic cults. I mean, what the fuck?
And marks them with a star.
Marks it with a star. Yeah, like, they drew a star on my kid, behind. I mean, it's terrible. I don't get it. I don't. I don't think I'll ever understand it. And I think the fact that I don't understand it is probably a good thing because I feel like if I understand it, I'm part of the problem because this does not make sense. But the trial started because oh damn. Yeah. Where was that? Okay, bear with me. It's early. Once again, we see here that even though a man has been accused of abusing children, somehow his mother is brought into the trial as a key defendant with the absurd allegations that she is a Satanist who partakes in infanticide and animal sacrifice. And this reminds me of a darker version of Suspiria, the movie I mentioned last week, which if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. Episode 2 and 1 in the bonus. Uh, but it's a movie about a girl who joins a dance studio, and the dance studio is hiding a secret satanic cult. Uh, they're not actually. Wait, hold on, hold on. No. Damn, what am I doing, Wendy? What's going on, with me? I think the fact that this is the second time around, I'm just like, no. Suspiria is about a woman who joins a dance studio, and it's a coven of witches. Um, still go back and listen to their episodes. You'll get a better idea what's going on. Anyway, but a preschool is hiding a dark secret of a satanic cult. Even though these allegations were horrendous and terrifying, it seems these were the ramblings of a mentally disturbed person. But nonetheless, after an investigation by the Children's Institute Internationally, or CII, charges were brought and multiple people were indicted. Now, the CII is going to be mentioned a couple of times. And they're the ones who are basically over the investigation of the children. And they pretty much would push whatever narrative they wanted. And I think the DA kept allowing their evidence and allowing them to pursue their investigation because they were giving them the results that the DA wanted. And at one point, an outside group came in and did its own investigations and found that a lot of the evidence that the CII was claiming was false. Just remember that. And so, um, multiple people were indicted. Once again, according to the website, fairtrials.com, on March 22nd, 1984, a grand jury indicted Ray Buckley and Peggy Buckley, Ray's mother, Peggy Ann Buckley, Ray's sister, Virginia McMartin, founder of the preschool of 30 years, and 3 other McMartin teachers, Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babette Spittler. The grand jury initially indicted the McMartin 7 on 115 counts of child sexual abuse. 2 months later, an additional 93 indictments were added as District Attorney Robert, here we go, this guy's name, Psilocybin. I don't know. This dude, I can't pronounce his last name, but he seems like an ass, so it's probably okay. Because I don't understand how he continued to prosecute these charges without evidence. Philobosian, Phil Obosian,
Mr. P.
Bobby P. Pursued pursued his strategy of hyping the McMartin case to boost his chances in an upcoming primary election. That says everything you need to know right there. This man was seeking re-election, and he had the trial of the century fall into his lap, and he was going to do everything he could to convict these people so that he could get re-elected.
To become the hero.
Now, if this hadn't happened in an election year, it probably wouldn't happen this way, but here we are. So in June, bail for Peggy Buckley was set at $1 million, and Ray Buckley was held without bail. His fucking mother got $1 million bail for not even. She probably had nothing to do with the school. Out of nowhere, she just had cops show up and say, "Hey, we're taking you downtown," and now here she is sitting in prison. You know, crazy. Drink. Key facts about this case. Okay, Dr. Astrid Hager of CII, not CIA, interrogated 150 children and determined over 80% had been molested, even though there was no evidence to support that theory. None. 7 defendants were accused of 397 sexual crimes for more than what was being charged, but ultimately all charges would be dropped except for the charges against Ray and Peggy. Multiple searches were conducted on all the homes, but no evidence of photographs were ever found. Now, these photographs that they're talking about is they would basically claim they would ask children to do naked gymnastics and things like that, and they would photograph them and video it. And they were supposedly taking part in secret underground rooms that were connected to secret underground tunnels that were connected to the daycare. Now, what? Um, what what's really crazy is they brought in like excavators, huge tractors with buckets, and they dug up the ground all around this daycare and preschool, and left huge holes and found nothing, zero, zilch. So I guess this school was left with like a moat around it, basically. After all this was done, I mean, like even if it was operational again, like they've destroyed it, and they found nothing. Like it was all for nothing, and their tax dollars paid for it. $15 million is child cost. Before the trial even began, there was even a documentary being made about it, which I think is insane. And even for that time, like who was making documentaries back in the '80s like that? Today, maybe I could kind of see it happening, like real time documentaries happening. But we live in the modern age of social media. But back then, the internet hasn't even happened, and the fact that a documentary is being made, I mean, that's wild. That's crazy. Um, but the documentary, they had to turn the video evidence over to the attorney generals because it contained video of one of the prosecutors saying a lack of evidence was enough that none of them should have been in the courtroom. So even the prosecutors were saying that they don't even have the evidence to convict them, but yet they're continuing with the trial. Now, there's multiple trials in this. They ended up having 2 trials. The first trial was the one that was the most insane. The first trial contained some wild testimony, including Buckley admitting that he didn't wear underwear and own Playboys, that he would sleep under a triangle over his bed, and one of the prosecutor's main witnesses was accused of manipulating evidence to push the narrative of molestation without true evidence. So they get Buckley on trial, or sorry, on the stand. They start pushing him to testify, and they say, "Sir, is it true that you sleep without underwear?" He says, "Yes." And they say, "He's a Satanist." And then they say, "Sir, you have Playboys?" He says, "Yes." And they say, "His mother commits satanic rituals uh, on children." It's like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry if I sound like a little like out of sorts here, but this is just, I don't know. I just don't understand it. I don't get it. The thing about the triangles is kind of weird. I think Buckley was actually a little more esoteric in his ways, and there was the people, especially back in the '80s, who felt like pyramids like held like all this power, and so what they would do is they would construct these like pyramid shapes where they would like they had like a hat they would wear and put the pyramid over their head. Buckley would even suspend a pyramid over his bed, and they felt like it helped them receive information from the cosmos, from the gods better. Um, and interestingly enough, I think MythBusters did an episode about it, um, testing out does pyramids help boost your information,
Telepathy.
telepathy. Yeah. What if they tested ESP? I can't remember. I think it's it's kind of funny too because you think about Aleister Crowley like wearing like that big hat. It almost looks like a triangle for a pyramid. um. So if you sleep with your with no underwear on, you're probably a Satanist, according to this trial. Um. But oh yeah, and the so I told you about the CII. The reason they were pushing the CII was because that lady was manipulating her evidence. She would ask like a 2.5-year-old, uh, you know, did this happen to you? Is this the person? And you know, no matter what the answer was, she was getting what she wanted. And even I think one of the jurors even said that even if she investigated or interrogated a 2-year-old and asked that 2-year-old if they were related to Abe Lincoln, whether they were or not, that child was going to be related to Abe Lincoln because that's the narrative they wanted. um, but after 30 months of testimony and 3 months of jury deliberations, it took the jury 3 months to try to decide. The trial was deadlocked. Now, the second trial happened with only 11 allegations, 3 children, less witnesses, and only lasted 3 months. So what they tried to do was the first trial was so wild, had so much going on that they tried to simplify it, and they still couldn't convict it. They still couldn't provide the evidence, and Buckley is still in jail at this time. After an excruciating deliberation, the jury was once again deadlocked, and the judge refused to allow any more trials. I think he was tired of all the circus that was going on surrounding the trial because I think it was a media sensation. I think the media picked up on this and they were pushing it. They were pushing the guilty narrative, by the way, which we'll talk about in a second. The aftermath of all this was that the lives of all these children and teachers were changed forever. And the website writes the McMartin preschool abuse trial was costly in many ways. In monetary terms, it cost taxpayers over $15 million. For the defendants, the cost of the trial included long terms in jail. Buckley spent 5 years in jail before being released on bail, loss of homes, jobs, loss of life savings, and a stigma that might never leave. The children, too, were victims. Ray Buckley in an interview said, those children went through hell. Those poor children went through hell. But I'm not the cause of their hell, and neither is my mother. The cause of their hell is the adults who took this case and made it what it was. And the parents, too, suffered. Many felt betrayed by the justice system. The community of the Manhattan Beach was another victim, left uneasy and polarized by the long investigation and judicial proceedings. And the media in this trial published stories that strongly favored the prosecution. They drove the narrative that this school was guilty before having a chance to receive a fair trial by jury. And we may never know if anything was truly happening at that school, but with the lack of evidence provided by the prosecution, no convictions were ever achieved in a court of law. And one last thought as I continue to look for the perfect line, I write, as a way to wrapping up this insane tale, I continue to uncover more and more insane details about this case. So if you're interested, look this case up. It's definitely worth reading about, especially if you're into law or true crime or anything like that. this is one of the more substantial cases I think that America's ever seen. Um,
And what was the name of the case again?
it's the Clinton preschool case. Yep. It isn't for the faint of heart, but it deserves to be studied because it's the perfect storm of how pushing the idea of a family of Satanists that infiltrated a daycare could, just by sheer insinuation and flat out accusations, turn a whole community on its ear. Listening to this case, then, you turn your eye to the Salem witch trials, and you see that society hasn't progressed in the least. All it takes is that spark of ideology if perhaps someone believes different than I do, and it will grow brighter than the fires used to burn the witches, and ultimately will cause more damage for a longer period of time because those people present day or in 1692 will forever be stained with falsehood. So even today, when we look back at the Salem witch trials, people still think of those people as witches, even though a lot of that stuff was over like land disputes, or I didn't like this person, so I accused them of this, or you know,
Well, and if you'll remember, a lot of those ladies just finally admitted to being witches to end their suffering
yep,
from being held in dirt prisons and starved to death and yeah, so they just wanted like end their suffering. So they're like, yeah, I did this.
yeah. I mean that even happened like today, like in this trial, people were just they were pumping out confessions left and right because they didn't want to be, you know, they just wanted this done. They wanted to get on with their lives, whatever their life was going to be, whether it be stuck in prison or they were released. They just wanted to be on with it. So you know, I think it's important to know that when you push the false narrative, when you push misinformation, it hurts more than just people because words mean a lot. And so you think like back in 1692 when someone said, "Oh, she's a witch," and you think, "Oh, how could they think someone's a witch? That's absurd." And yet here we are in the 80s and 90s, and we're accusing people of being part of a satanic ritualistic cult, and people still believed it. Like we've come no farther. We're doing the same thing. I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to talk about. I mentioned some of the other cases. Um, Probably the other most notable case is the West Memphis Three. West Memphis Three. Jesus. In that case, three young men were accused of murdering three children. Um, the original thought was that the murder was the result of a satanic cult, and it was because of the way the children were found. They were mutilated and hogtied and tied to their bicycles, and found in a creek. There's some details I'm leaving out about that. There is a documentary also that goes into detail, and it's a very good documentary, but it's very graphic. So just be warned if you go watch it. But it's very interesting. This is one of the cases that pushes one of the first ones that pushed DNA evidence to overturn their case. Um, Damien Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly were convicted in 1993 for the uh, murders. Baldwin and Miskelly were given life. Damien Eccles was to receive death. Eccles was a high school dropout and a self-proclaimed Wiccan, and was immediately singled out. Now he was the kind of kid that would walk around in black, listen to rock and roll, heavy metal, and they immediately pointed the finger at him. And he really didn't have any association with the other two kids, but they were brought in anyway, and so this trifecta of quote unquote evil was formed in the eyes of the law. Just because Eccles was a Wiccan and wore black and listened to rock and roll. But the conviction came after pressure was put on Miss Kelly to confess and testify against the other two. Now, it's notable to mention Miss Kelly had an IQ of 72. This is a mentally challenged man who was put into these interrogation rooms and coerced into giving a testimony that favor the cops as a plea, um, and they took advantage of his mental capabilities. Um,
He probably didn't realize he was damaging himself in the process.
no, because they would actually say things. They would say the way that they would word it, the way that they would mention it is, they would say, "Listen, if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, it will help this person." So he would give the answer they wanted. They pushed him to give their narrative. Um, and I think they said he had a his mental capability was that of like a third grader, which is
Oh wow.
yeah. So he's very very mentally challenged, and they didn't let him have his parents there. They didn't let him have lawyers there. I mean, everything about this was wrong. Nothing about this trial was right, and these boys spent years in prison. In fact, they were convicted in 1993, but they were finally released on an Alford plea in 2011, which means that they were set free, but they were still considered guilty. So even though they were let go, the court still thought that they committed the murder. So they're innocent, they're out and about, but they're still carrying around the stigma that they were murderers. Well, Damien Eccles pushed for mental stability. He's outspoken about mental health, um, and he was one of the ones. He was one of the forefront people that pushed for DNA evidence, and he continued to maintain their innocence. So throughout this whole time, like you said, we didn't do this. We are not guilty. We will not. We're not going to accept this. This is not us. And after many, many trials and tribulations and legal standings and this and that, their DNA was actually finally used. DNA was sequenced, and no match was found for the three young men convicted of the murder. No DNA evidence matched. However, one of the young children who was murdered, DNA matched with his stepfather and one of his best friends, David Jacoby.
Wow.
His stepfather's name is Terry Hobbs. His best friend is David Jacoby. And it is said that this um, murder was a cover up because the children found Terry and his friend David in a compromising situation.
Oh.
And, I think that that's a whole nother ball of wax. Um, but, and I don't know if he's been convicted yet. I think he actually died. But I think that I really, you know, the kids that went through this, the kids who were accused of this murder, they deserve every bit of justice. So I hope that these people will be charged. I hope that. Let me say this: I hope that the people who convicted these murders are charged. Not necessarily these two, but with DNA evidence that matches, I think that's interesting. Another interesting case was the Oak Hill. I think it's called the Oak Hill preschool case or something like that. It took place in Oak Hill, Texas. There was a couple, Dan and Fran Keller, who were accused of sexual abuse, forcing children. Listen to this. This is crazy. Uh, they supposedly forced children to drink blood, and they even were accused of flying groups of children to Mexico to be abused by soldiers, and then fly back home to have them back at the preschool in time for their parents to pick them up in the evening.
Not possible.
And I mean, they they were they got charged with it. They were accused of charges of satanic sexual abuse, and even though there was a lack of evidence in the prosecution, they were convicted and sentenced to 48 years in prison. Now, in 2013, despite serving 21 years in prison, they were released and exonerated of all charges due to lack of evidence. So there was no evidence, and they were finally released and set free and said, "Okay, whatever, you're innocent."
I mean, would there not be flight records or passports needed to ship these children?
I think we know. I think we all know by now, thanks to the Epstein files, that do have to have flight records for everything. So they would have to know who's on these. Like, they would have to know. Like, there would have to be some evidence that this charter had taken place. You know, there's no way that these guys are flying using like guerrilla fighters to fly people back and forth from U.S. to Mexico to like soldiers. I mean, it's just the allegations were crazy. This is a drink. Uh, this is another case that you should look into. I mean, I don't mean to make jokes about this. I don't know how else to deal with this because it's just so absurd. Like it's just I don't know how else to react to this. I'm sorry.
Great.
I'm not saying that. Another case involves a man named John Kinney. In 1991, Kinney was going through a divorce. He was accused by his wife of sexually abusing his son, and him and his sister were part of a. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just this hurts. He was accused of abusing his son and daughter as part of a satanic ritual because his wife forced his son and daughter to testify against him. He was accused and sentenced to 20 years of prison. But later on, both of the children recanted their testimony. They admitted they were coerced and forced to give particular testimony. And after 32 years of going through all this, Kinney was exonerated on all charges, and all charges were dropped. The court admitted that there was no evidence and that the conviction was part of the mass hysteria known as the Satanic Panic. In the court's eyes, Satanic Panic is known as a mass hysteria. Just let that sink in. Kinney's trial and all the previously mentioned cases, the West Memphis Three, the McClinton free school trial, the Oak Hill trial, all these cases serve as a poignant reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and the importance of safeguarding against wrongful conviction. His exoneration not only restores his reputation, but also highlights the need for vigilance and the pursuit for justice. I think the last thing to say about this is that, you know, pushing the false narrative without research is dangerous. It can ruin lives, it can ruin businesses, it can ruin the victims' lives. People who are not even, you know, even though they weren't abused because of these trials, it's like they're being abused anyway. Um, all in the name of pushing what you believe is right through misinformation, through lies, to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, whatever you're trying to say. And it's dangerous. So I think, especially in this day and time, when someone tells you something, it's important that you go and research what you're being told, because just because you hear it from someone else doesn't always make it true. So make sure you know what you're saying is true before you push that
Spot on.
story. So, what you think, Wendy?
Pretty interesting and outlandish.
Yeah. It's wild to think that we've come no farther than 1692. We were still like punishing people for believing something different or what we think is something different. And the truth is, these people probably weren't even Satanists at all. They probably went to church. They probably were. I'm not saying that everyone was. I'm just saying they weren't what they claimed they were. I mean, a lot of these were just older. The people who were running the daycare were older people. Um, I don't know. I mean, these were people who were part of this community forever, and these are people who contribute to society like normal people, and yet out of nowhere, this false story comes up, and their lives are overturned and ruined.
Identity is ruined. So, I would probably move where no one knew me and,
Oh yeah,
go by a nickname or something.
I'm sure a lot of these people like uprooted and left. I mean, if they grew up in grew up in these towns, like they spent their whole life there, and they're forced to leave now, all because of people spreading misinformation, like lies.
Naysayers.
Yep. Well, at the risk of rambling on, I think I'm gonna end it there. So I think next time we're gonna do something a little more lighthearted. We're gonna actually do some hauntings. This is the Hauntological Society, so let's talk about some ghosts. But I thought it was important to open in a three-part series to talk about mass hysteria. And just because you think someone is something else, it doesn't mean that they're bad. Doesn't mean that things are horrible. Um, People are good people. There are bad people in this world, but there's still good people around. So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for checking us out. Hope you come back next week and we'll talk about some more scary stuff. Not necessarily scary, just fun stuff. Ghosts. Check us out on Facebook. We have the Hauntological Society podcast. I have an email, the Hauntological Society podcast at gmail.com. I've already started getting emails, so send yours in. I'd like to start reading some of those. Um, Make sure you rate and review all our episodes because it helps us get more listeners, and the more listeners we get, the more we can do this. So we really appreciate your support, and tell all your friends. That being said, I'm Eric.
I'm Wendy.
We're out.